entitled to having access to his children, which isn't necessarily wrong. But he felt that regardless of what terms him and my mother were on, he had rights to still be in contact with his children. Mind you, at this time, I had never met the man. Obviously, I have pictures of him, had pictures with him when I was a baby, but I didn't know much about him. I didn't really remember anything about him when he came back into our lives. This man was practically a stranger to my sister and I. And as a former sergeant in the military, his affection was not really his strong point. His emotional maturity was not at the highest point when it came to dealing with children and relationships and family. As you can obviously in my mother's their failed relationship is an example of that. He would often make us do military punishments for things that would relatively be, small mistakes like dropping a glass, or he would point out any flaws, such as my laugh, or criticize my sister and I, ultimately affecting our self-esteem, making us feel like there's something wrong with us for laughing the way we do, or for finding joy in the things that we did. We were still growing up in a lower income neighborhood, but we weren't necessarily in the hood. We weren't in no third ward. We were in for the most part, a very calm environment. So some of our interests, some of the things that we were exposed to were different from the things that he was exposed to growing up in the small town of Jennings, Louisiana. And so he would often judge us for that, or make comments about us and how we were bougie or whatever. And so as a child, it didn't really click until now, but as a child, it definitely did kind of hurt our self-esteem, because this is a man that you're supposed to have this strong connection with, that is supposed to teach you how a man is supposed to love his family, and he's critiquing you and making you feel less than, or singling you out, making you feel yeah. So anyways, he would also dismiss our emotions, and scold us for showing any kind of feelings, whether we were upset about something or whatever, which resulted in me beginning to develop the bad habit of bottling up my emotions. I no longer knew how to properly express my emotions, and it got to the point where I wouldn't even enjoy singing around him. I was terrified of this man for a good portion of my life. He struggled with drinking problems, and despite him jumping through all these hoops to get back with my mother and to be involved in our lives, he wasn't very involved. He had a lot of other children outside of the relationship, so he was spreading himself thin between multiple households, and he was never really there physically for us. He would only be there every, sometimes at first it was like every other day, and then it became every other week, and then he would be gone for months at a time sometimes. Like he was never really there, and when he was there physically, he wasn't there emotionally or mentally. He would just be there to provide financial support and just to say that he was there, and then go do whatever he did. As I stated before, my father also had a drinking problem. And when he would come home drunk, he would be extremely aggressive, verbally abusive, and he would also threaten to be extremely physically abusive to me at times, which seriously messed me up, because this is a 6-foot man who's supposed to be, this loving father, and he would threaten to put his hands on me. He would tower over a child and threaten to put his hands on me. And so it just kind of really messed with my ability to trust, and to feel worthy, and it just messed up my a lot of yeah. As a result of his inconsistency, I ended up picking up a lot of forms of trauma along the way, such as codependency issues, abandonment issues, and just many other self-esteem related issues. I wasn't happy with my body, with my skin, just a lot of things. According to page 179 of the textbook, self-esteem determines whether or not an individual feels good about themselves, and if they feel that they are lovable and worthwhile. And because of my very unhealthy relationship with my father, it impacted my ability to feel good about myself in ways I didn't really recognize until later on in life. Dealing with this unhealthy relationship with my father negatively affected my sense of belonging, understanding, trusting, self-enhancing, and controlling. It made it very difficult for me to develop healthy relationships with other people, especially men, as I got older, because I no longer knew how to healthily express my emotions or to establish boundaries with anybody. On top of that, I couldn't trust anybody. I didn't, the one man that I was supposed to be able to trust to treat me correctly and to show me how I'm supposed to be treated in the world by others didn't really do a great job. I also became very fixated on being a people pleaser to prove that I was worth being loved instead of focusing on building and growing myself. This was made very apparent to me once I got to college in 2019. As humans, we naturally want to feel some kind of sense of belonging, and upon my arrival, I was in the band with hundreds of other freshmen. We were lumped together as what is known as crabs. And during this time, during freshman crab camp or whatever, I endured a lot of, I attempted to develop a couple of relationships with other men, and I endured a lot of confusion and hurt throughout those relationships because I never truly healed from what I went through my entire childhood. When the red flags popped up in those relationships, I wasn't as quick to leave, and instead I stuck around wanting to understand why why they react the way they did, why they treated me the way they did, and on top of that, I was using them to fulfill my need or desire to feel wanted, to try and prove that I was worthy of being loved, and I was seeking validation from these people in the wrong places. And I often used these relationships to distract myself from what I had not healed from. So with all that being said, I was not really in control of my upbringing, but I am in control of who I choose to become now that I am out of that environment. So I have recently begun my self-enhancing stage, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, I'm in charge of where my life goes. I have begun to engage in healthy lifestyle choices by going to the gym, watching what I consume, and just, being very cautious in who I decide to give my energy to and invest my time into. Although my relationship with my father is very strained still, he has made progress himself. And so just reflecting on all of this and looking back, I learned to question myself less. And I'm just more focused on working on becoming the woman that I know I can be. I'm no longer neglecting my needs, and I'm excited to see where I go. I'm still kind of in the middle of it, so thank you for watching my video and listening to my story. I genuinely appreciate your time. Goodbye.